far off into the future can you prophesy? Would 100 years be pretty decent? Or maybe 500 or 1,000 years? Well, let's look at a few more prophecies of the Old Testament that illustrate God's inspiration of his prophets. 600 years before Jesus became our sacrifice, Isaiah 53 presented him as a sacrifice for sin. Now, Jews and others have tried to do some pretty creative wrangling to make Isaiah 53 into a metaphor or about someone else. But Isaiah isn't the only passage we're dealing with. Here are a few more passages and details to consider along with Isaiah 53. First of all, his death would be by crucifixion. 1,000 years before the crucifixion, David wrote in Psalm 22 and verse 16, "For dogs have surrounded me, the congregation of the wicked has enclosed me, they pierced my hands and my feet." Stoning was the common form of capital punishment in David's day, and infrequently burning, but why does he refer to piercing the hands and the feet? And yet Luke 23 verse 33 tells us that Jesus was crucified, and that exactly involves piercing the hands and the feet. We also read that he would be numbered with the transgressors. Isaiah 53 and verse 12 says, "Therefore I will divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors." As you may recall, with him they also crucified two robbers, one on his right and the other on his left. Mark 15 and verse 27. It's important to point out that these details were completely out of the control of the disciples. The very fate of his garments were prophesied 1,000 years beforehand by David in Psalm 22 and verse 18. David wrote, "They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." Why cast lots if the garments are to be divided equally among those who are present? Well, we don't understand why until we read of the fulfillment in John chapter 19, verses 23 through 24. Here we read, "The soldiers, therefore, when they had crucified Jesus, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, a part to every soldier, and also the tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece. They said therefore to one another, Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it, to decide whose it shall be." The betrayal price is one of my favorite twists from Zechariah chapter 11 and verse 12. "Then I said to them, If it is agreeable to you, give me my wages, and if not, refrain. So they weighed out for my wages 30 pieces of silver." This was fulfilled by Judas Iscariot. We read of it in Matthew 26, verses 14 and 15. But it's the fate of the betrayal price where we have this very interesting twist. Reading from Zechariah chapter 11 and verse 13. "And the Lord said to me, Throw it to the potter, that princely price they set on me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them into the house of the Lord for the potter." The fulfillment is seen in Matthew 27, beginning in verse 3. When we read the prophecy, we have to ask, why did Zechariah cast the silver into the house of the Lord when he was commanded to cast it to the potter? When we read that fulfillment, we understand how it all works out. Now, Jews, generally speaking, were not fond of the idea of Gentiles being saved. Jonah was repulsed by the thought, and he tried to run away from his responsibility of preaching to the Ninevites. However, the Old Testament has the gospel going forth to the Gentiles in a number of passages. In Zechariah 2, we read this, "Sing for joy and be glad, O daughter of Zion, for behold, I am coming, and I will dwell in your midst, declares the Lord. And many nations will join themselves to the Lord in that day, and will become my people. Then I will dwell in your midst, and you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you." That's found in verses 10 and 11. The salvation that we read of here for the Gentiles, it's actually foretold in a number of Old Testament passages. I've put them at the bottom of the screen here so that you don't have to just take my word for it, but I would love for you to look those up and see how prophecy has prophesied something that Well, when we look at the Old Testament prophecies, the question becomes, how did they know details so obscure and sometimes counter to popular opinion and their own personal preferences? In the face of all that, they still got it right, hundreds of years before fulfillment. Well, join me in our next video, and we're going to talk about modern psychics and the most important aspect of a prophet's work.